Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another installment of Mills and Reeve's Halftime Equaliser series. In the hot seat today, we've got Pitre from Sports Resolutions UK. Hi, Kat. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to chatting to you about your sports law journey to date. For those listening, actually, quite interestingly, Kat and I both work in sports law in London, but neither of us are from the UK. And we both started our journey in international sports law back in 2014 in Spain. But I might let Kat explain a bit more about that as we go along. So Kat, just to kick things off, why don't you tell us about your role at Sports Resolutions UK and your journey and career in sports law today?
Yeah, of course. So I've been with Sport Resolutions for over 5 years now. And how I got started in sports law was my background was in gymnastics. So I used to coach competitive gymnastics, judge women's artistic gymnastics. And I held leadership roles within the club where I was coaching. And then after my undergraduate studies, I went to law school. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do in terms of practice area. And I'm from Canada originally, and we had a very rigid recruitment process for law firms in second year of law school, and I didn't really see myself at any of the firms in Ottawa, where I'm from. So I started thinking, well, what is of interest to me, and how can I get experience in that, and where do I go from here? So obviously, with my background in gymnastics, I thought, well, that's something I'd love to explore. I love the Olympics, everything around the Olympics, and disputes arising. That was all very interesting to me. So I started looking for opportunities to get involved in sports law as much as I could while I was in law school. And it's not like here where there are a lot of sports law programs. In Canada, that's not really a thing. You might have one sports law class throughout your whole 3 years of law school, if you're lucky and it falls within your schedule. But we didn't have that at the time I was there. So I did, I did so many different things just to try to get exposure to the area at the time. So I did an internship with this organization called Sport Law and Strategy Group for course credit. I did a major research paper with the supervision of my health law professor on hyperandrogenism, which was just getting in the media at the time around the London 2012 Olympics with the Caster Semenya case. And then I volunteered as a doping control officer for competitions. I volunteered for the Pan Am Games when they came to Toronto. I wrote a sports law column for the law students paper. So basically, I tried to get involved in all the ways I could. And then in third year, I really decided, well, I figured I need to decide where I'm going to go from here. Obviously, having not partaken in the formal recruitment process. And I was fortunate that I was working at the Federal Court of Canada at the same time as I was studying, in addition to judging. I always had so many things going on, you know, and I started looking into master's programs. It's not in Europe, you know, LLMs are quite popular, but in Canada, you don't do an LLM unless you want to specialize in a very niche sector. So I started looking into what was available in sports law. And there were programs in the States, but they were more entertainment law focused. And that's how I came across the EASDAY Masters in International Sports Law, and how I ended up in Madrid with you, Tiran, and a great group of colleagues and friends. And then it kind of took off from there. So I did an internship at a firm in Lausanne where we did only CAS cases before UEFA and FIFA, and I loved the work. And then from there, I got a job at the Sport Dispute Resolution Centre of Canada in Montreal, worked there for a year, and then the opportunity arose here at Sport Resolutions to head up the case team. So over 5 years now that I've been here.
Yeah, wow, brilliant. That's such an international story. I mean, you started in Canada, and then you went to Spain, and then Switzerland, then back to Canada, and then now in England. And you know what? I think that's quite a common story for, you mentioned it yourself, for people that are not from Europe, or I'd say even not from England or Switzerland. Realistically, to work in the sports law industry, at least to start off with, you do have to move overseas and go where the opportunity is. So that's not an uncommon story. Well, that's great. So now that you're in sports res, what does a typical day at Sports Resolutions look like for you?
Well, there's no typical day. That's one thing, because the work we do is so varied, and every day is different. But I can give you some examples of what it might entail. So on one day, I might have, for example, a meeting with an international federation who's looking to externalize its dispute resolution process so that it is more independent. So I might have a meeting with them to discuss, what it is that they're looking for and what are the services we can offer them. And then obviously I have a team of 6 senior and case managers who manage the day-to-day cases. So providing them with guidance and support on some of the trickier cases or procedural matters arising. There's also, we'll get a number of case referrals every day, and I will need to consider who would be the best suited arbitrator, mediator, or panel member to sit on each of those cases. And then we might have some decisions that need to be issued to parties on a particular day that I will need to review and provide, any feedback if necessary on. So it's very varied, depending on what is going on that day. Having conversations with arbitrators about potential appointments, different stakeholders, whether our service agreements are still fit for purpose, whether we need to amend those contracts, change our internal policies if we have new recurring types of cases that are coming in, because we like to have obviously internal procedures for each type of cases that we administer. So ensuring that we have the right tools and procedures to handle any new type of referrals that come in an efficient manner. That's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, wow, that's really varied. It's like you're behind the scenes with lots of different federations and disputes, and you're sort of greasing the wheels, so to speak, in a lot of that, which is brilliant. That's super varied. So, what would you say is the most interesting matter you've worked on at your time at Sports Resolutions?
That's a tough one. There's not like a single case, for example, that sticks out to me. I enjoy the international component of my work. I enjoy the international work, integrity-related cases I'm quite interested in. But I find, the most interesting work is more, influencing or driving change across some federations, or even in other sport national tribunals, where they're looking to set up something similar to what already exists here, and they're looking for some guidance. So I think it's more the influencing change across federations so that they can have better processes in place, more independent due process, all that kind of thing. That I find the most interesting, more so than a specific case. Yeah,
that makes sense. That's interesting, I guess. Just to change tack a little bit. I mean, part of this focus of our halftime Equaliser series is to put a spotlight on women working in sport and sports law. Why don't you tell us a bit about Women in Sports Law? Because I know that's an organization that you've been involved with for a long time. So what's your role there? What's the organization about? What do you try and do, etc.?
Yeah, so Women in Sports Law is an international not-for-profit that was founded 5 years ago. We celebrated a 5-year anniversary last week, actually. So it's very much still in its infancy. It brings together members around the world that are working in the sector, women that are working in the sector, to exchange, to network, and also to give them visibility. Because obviously they're underrepresented in the sector. So that's kind of what our aims are. And my role within the organization, I was elected to the board in 2019. So I've been sitting on that board since then. And it's, planning the strategy for the next few years, what our aims are, how we're going to get there. as I said, it's still kind of in its infancy, so there's a lot of groundwork to still be done as to how best do we achieve our aims, and provide the best services to our members, the most benefit, basically.
Nice, great. That's brilliant. So for anyone listening, if they want to get involved with women in sports, so how do they go about doing that?
They can join as a member or as a friend or supporter, because everyone is, welcome to participate in the events regardless of gender. So we post on the Women in Sports Law website. If you have a quick Google, wislaw.ch. And we have some virtual events, we have some in-person events, networking, also some panel discussions to showcase women working in the sector, whether that's, an in-house panel or an arbitrator panel, how to become an arbitrator, or decision-making, or all kinds of different topics. We also hold an annual conference once a year. So that's a great one because you meet people from all over the world that are working in the sector. I mean, it's been personally for me, I find it really beneficial because I've met so many people from other countries that are doing similar type of work. And just being able to exchange ideas with them has been great. Brilliant.
That's great. So, I mean, on the topic of women in sports, so not the organization, but just women in sports. So what would you say are some of the key issues that women who work in sports law, for example, face today?
I think it depends on the country and the personal circumstances of the person, of course, but I think in the broader sense, there's obviously unconscious bias. Everyone has unconscious bias, and I think that is very much a factor to women getting the number of appointments or getting selected to act as counsel on a case, and that kind of thing. That I think is the main challenge, really, is that, there are lots of great women doing work in the sector, but they don't get the visibility that men do, because, oftentimes people will select people that look like them to appoint. They won't think of others, or because the people that are, say, on a panel look like them, they won't even think about how, well, that's an all-male panel. Why is it that we're always having all-male panels? That type of thing. And even, if you have a decision-making group that is of mixed gender, if what you're constantly exposed to and used to is only seeing men in certain positions, then you don't question it and you don't even necessarily notice it. So that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to break through, is to get that representation, that visibility, and diversity, not just of gender. I think diversity in general is important. You need to have it at all levels of an organization, and people just need to be aware that unconscious bias plays a role in everyone's lives. I don't know, it's something I'm very, very passionate about. Diversity of thought, is really important to have a well-run organization.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think diversity in sports law could be better, shall we say? I completely agree with you. Diversity of thought is crucial. It sounds like it is something that is changing, but slowly. But organizations like Women in Sports Law certainly help. So to changing tack again, so what would you say on a more personal basis, what would you say has been the biggest challenge you faced in your sports law career to date?
Yeah, I mean, that is a personal one. And obviously, as someone who works abroad, I've made certain decisions to pursue this career and certain sacrifices, just like others in my situation have. One of those is to not be able to see your family and your friends as often as you would like when they live on a different continent. But I guess that's one aspect. And then in terms of a challenge in my career, something I've faced that I found really difficult, because people don't often see the struggles, right? They only see the achievements and how great your career is, but they don't see all the barriers that have come in the way, or the rejections. And one of those for me in particular that I found difficult was many years ago, I was offered a role at an international federation in-house, and it turned out that that country's immigration rules favored Europeans versus people from third-party nationals, we shall call them. And as such, the offer was rescinded on the basis that the immigration authorities favored offering the role to a European, despite them, the organization thinking that, I was the best suited person for that role. So that was very difficult for me personally at the time. Obviously now I see on reflection that things work out for a reason, and, you end up where you're supposed to be. But yeah, it's not always, roses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything you just said, resonates with me a lot too, especially as a non-European. I think, people look at the successes and where you've ended up, and they don't quite see the failures and the difficulties. And I think the biggest thing, and it's something, it leads on quite nicely to the next question I'm about to ask you. I think the hardest thing for me has been the sacrifice of being away from home, right? I'm from Australia, so I live on the opposite side of the world now. And for any non-European, effectively, that works in sports law, if you have to come to Europe, that means in practice you are living away from your home and your family, and that is an enormous sacrifice. And I think sometimes people that are not from Europe, or that are from Europe, probably wouldn't appreciate that, but that's certainly a difficulty many of us face, I think. But it leads on quite nicely to my next question, because I often get lots of queries on LinkedIn or Twitter from students and people aspiring to get into the sports law industry. And often one of the things I tell them is to appreciate that there's lots of sacrifices you must make, including moving to the other side of the world. But what advice would you give to someone starting out in sports law now, particularly, I guess, someone that's not from Europe? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. The first one would be to think outside the box in terms of what you're looking for. I think when you're starting out, you tend to look for roles that say in-house counsel or something similar, right? You don't think of roles that might be titled differently, but that might have really interesting job descriptions. So think outside the box, but also in terms of where you're willing to go. Because if you want to work in sports law, but you only want to work in your own city or in your own country, your opportunities will be limited, right? And your opportunities to grow and develop and the experiences you'll be able to have will be limited to what is there. So that would be my first one. My second one would be to set yourself apart, because there's so many people that want to be in sports law. And, everyone, most people love sports, right? So you really need to find what defines you and sets you apart from other candidates, and then kind of focus on that and expand on that. How are you different than those other hundreds of applicants who also think that sports law is interesting and would like to get into it? And then, just like in any other role, right? Hard work, diligent work, knowing your stuff. And then I think the last one I would say would be to be resilient and to be perseverant, because there will be rejection along the way. And it might be that, you apply for a role at a federation or anywhere, right? And you don't get it. But then a year later, another role comes along at that same federation, and that role might be better suited for you. So if you're in fear of, rejection and of not trying again, then you're never going to get anywhere. I very much believe that things happen for a reason, and that the opportunities that are for you will come in time. So to me, if something is meant for you, then it will be. And if it's not meant for you, then something better will likely come along. So that's how I would go about if I was starting out. Again, that's what I would tell myself.
That's brilliant. I think that's brilliant advice. I think the resilience point in particular, it's such a incredibly competitive industry to get into, and I think you can't expect that everything will just fall into place. You are probably going to end up with more disappointments than successes, especially at the beginning, and that's just the truth of it. We've all learned about resilience during COVID, but if you want to make a career in sports law, especially if you're not from Europe, I think resilience is probably the number one thing you got to focus on. But that's some brilliant advice, Kat. Okay, those are all the substantive questions I had for you. But just to finish up and wrap up this interview, we do this with all of our guests. So I'm just going to give you a quick fire round of questions. So I've not sent this to you before or told you. Don't think too much about it. Just tell me the first answer that sort of comes to your head. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's your favorite sport?
Gymnastics.
It's an easy one. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Dogs. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh gosh. City High, what would you do?
All right, brilliant. Okay, yeah, that came to you quickly. And just lastly, what is your favorite city in the world?
City. Oh, Barcelona?
Barcelona, cool. No, not Madrid. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Sorry, Madrid.
Yeah.
You still hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So do I. I love Madrid. Barcelona's great too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Kat. It's been great having you on and great to hear about your career and some of the advice that you gave as well. I think it is relevant to lots of people that are trying to break into the industry. And great to hear about your role at Sports Resolutions and Women in Sports Law as well. So yeah, look out for this interview being posted on our social media channels. But thank you so much from all of us at Mills & Reeve. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful. It's been a pleasure chatting with you too.
No problem. Look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Bye.